Most people talk about leadership like it's theory. I've lived it in the mud, the chaos, and the moments nobody writes about. This show is the truth, raw, unfiltered, and built for leaders who actually give a damn. If you're ready to grow, ready to own your own story, and ready to lead from the front, you're in the right place. Speak up, show up, lead. Let's get into it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Speak Up, Show Up, Lead. And I'm here with Stephen Sopko. Before we get started, just like always, I have to tell you about my book, Speak Up, Show Up, Lead. It's also the name of the book, and it's my story of grit, growth, and leadership from the ground up. It's actually the leadership lessons from poverty to joining the military, serving a career there, and then transitioning out, having some hardship, and then starting my own business. But if that interests you, Speak Up, Show Up, Lead, Amazon.com. Now let's get into the real stuff. How you doing today, Stephen?
Doing fantastic. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you on. And, you know, you just have such an interesting background. I mean, I don't know if I've had too many guests that have done quite the amount of stuff you have. I mean, you've gone from working with small businesses to owning your own to working in corporate America and all the way down to the small business and everything in between. And now you have your own business again, and you're thinking about doing some other stuff with podcasting, and so I mean, my goodness, what a great conversation this could potentially be.
I'm enthusiastic about it too. It's one of those things where when I'm working with clients, sometimes I'll say, look, what we need to do is look back at all the stuff you've done and tie it together to make it look like you meant to do it. Because so often, you know, you look at somebody with, wow, you just kind of went from this to this, and that's incredibly impressive. And they're like, yes, exactly. It's the way I play pool. I take the shot, the ball goes in the pocket, and I'm like, yep, that's exactly what I meant was going to happen.
I like your point of view.
Absolutely.
So, you know, other than what I just told the audience about you, Stephen, would you mind giving us a kind of a rundown of your background a little bit, what you've done, and you know, kind of what could be interesting about our conversation today?
Fantastic. So thank you. I started my career in the Air Force as a contracting officer, negotiator, and went from that to corporate America. I was at Dell for a number of years where I led the teams negotiating with public sector customers for Dell across the U.S. After that, I was a number of small businesses in a bunch of different industries, the game industry, the offshoring industry, and then that led me to Oracle, where I was responsible for Europe, Middle East, Africa negotiations as the VP over that division. And when I left Oracle, it was as a result of a personal tragedy. I had a death in my family, and really that restarted my entire life. And so I started a company with a good friend of mine, also a former Oracle VP, called Palisade Compliance, and ran that for 10 years. Palisade is a terrific company defending people who are being audited by big software companies. About 2 years ago, I decided it was time for me to make a change. I live here on the Space Coast of Florida, and I had started mentoring a lot of startups, both in the space industry, but also in AI and some other tech industries. And that led me to really be a founder mentor here in Central Florida and then also across the US, and also working with Hyperframe Research as their expert on semiconductors and deep technology, space tech, that sort of thing. And that really gets me here. I think for the last 2 years, it's been, after running my own business as a COO for 10 years, having the freedom to be able to dig into a bunch of different areas has really been the journey I've been on for the last couple of years. And I think this is pretty much what I'm going to do from now on. I work as a consultant, I work as a mentor, I write, and I don't do just one thing constantly. And that apparently is what I need.
What I noticed in the bio that you sent me, and we talked about it before, you have a book that is getting ready to release, or maybe by now it's already released. Is that something you want to share with the audience, or would you rather?
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's funny because the interesting thing, a big part of what I do with my clients is I work with them on how to package the story of their business and what they're trying to sell and what they want people to buy. I do a lot of work in business development as a consultant. And when I left Palisade and went into the space industry, I started talking to people who They are designing the hatch for spacecraft. They're designing space stations that are going to orbit the moon. And when they talk about it, it is the most boring thing you can imagine. It's like they're career accountants at Dell, you know? And so what I realized was, okay, I'm thinking, all right, they're all engineers. This is space. This is weird. But then when I started to get back into tech a year ago, I realized everybody talks about what they do horribly. And now that resumes are dead, nobody's getting jobs with resumes anymore. The only way you're getting a job is by being a compelling speaker about what you do. And so what I did was I took a lot of what I do for my clients in narrative building and sort of stitching stories together, and I created a class for it. But the more I worked on the class, the more I realized it just needed to be a book and kind of teach people how to do it instead of trying to charge them to learn how to do it from me. So that's what I'm working on. The book will be out in March. It's in editing now because as it turns out, as a leader, I'm a great leader, and I need editing to be a great writer. So you probably familiar with that from doing your book, but yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where I am right now is letting an editor kind of help me hone my ideas a little bit. So
Yeah, I was lucky enough when I went to publish my book. Not only did I leverage AI to help me do the editing and to make it more clear, but I also have a wife who has helped other people edit their books, and so I had a built-in home help, and I don't know how she felt about that at the time. I think she's glad that it's sold and done
right.
well. And yeah, she says, well, I should write a book. You know, that's always what she says. I should write a book, and I'm like, well, you can, but
That's
anyway.
yeah. So yeah, so
But
I think the book is going to help people with take everything you've done and figure out what you're going to try to do, and then what stories do you need to be telling when you're networking that will convince people to give you a chance, that will kind of get them excited about it. And I think that's been the biggest thing. The thing I tell people is when you go to networking events, 99% of the people you meet cannot help you, but 100% of them know somebody who can. So your job is not to convince them. Your job is to educate them, teach them enough about you, so when they talk about you to someone else, you don't sound like an idiot. So,
oh, man, you know,
yeah.
I would say that through my 3.5 years that I've been in business and talking to all the people that I've talked to, I would say that, and this plays to what you're saying, the biggest issue that people have when they're networking is their elevator pitch. They can't get straight to the meat and potatoes on what they do uh, quickly, because if when you're in a room full of networking people, you lose somebody's attention if you don't talk to them about it right away, or it just gets into everything else in life, which it will anyway, but they won't remember it if you don't say it right away.
Well, or the worst thing that can happen to you is your elevator pitch. You've got it, you've honed it, you've practiced it, but then you use the same one over and over again. And
Oh yeah.
everybody around you is hearing you say the same words. You know, you just, you're like a Teddy Ruxpin. You pull the string and it just speaks the elevator pitch. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, if you created your business, then you know what you do. You just have to not be so nervous about it and just say it. Say it.
or you're exhausted about it. I think that's the thing I find so often is that especially solopreneurs and people who are in companies of less than 5 people, they've been working on it 70 hours a week for so long. When they talk about it, all that comes through is the exhaustion, not the
Oh yeah.
passion that got you into it in the first place. And so reconnecting with that passion is essential, because if you're not excited about it, nobody else is going to be.
That's true. Which is interesting because when it comes to small business owners or somebody who's starting a business, that kind of is a great segue into what we decided we were going to be talking about today. And, you know, about how fear is something that can limit you or propel you in leadership, or using fear in leadership, which doesn't work at all.
You know, it's interesting. I always think about fear as kind of like sugar in your diet. Fear does work, but for very short periods of
Mhm.
time. And I think that's why managers get seduced by it. We realize, you know, the first time as a manager, you drop the notion that, wow, all of you people working for me are lucky to have your job. So you all better line up and we're going to do this. The first time you do that and it works, it's wow, that worked a lot better than anything else I've ever tried. The thing is, it doesn't work a second time, or it
No.
does, but it works less well. And the third or fourth time you do it, then it's toxic. It just doesn't work for you anymore. But the challenge that you run into is when you lead a big organization. In my background, I've led organizations 200-300 people. You don't see it until it's too late, because you've created this culture of fear, and the managers one or two levels below you are pumping that fear out. And you don't even know it started to go wrong until it's 6 months later and you look at your retention numbers and everybody's leaving your organization.
Or when people are just rushing to get things done, and that causes, problems with productivity, which it may not be the work getting done, but the quality of the work getting done.
Yeah, the people are behaving in a way that reduces the pain. And that's not always the way you want them behaving.
No, no. And I talk about how servant leadership is really the way. And, you know, you and I discussed this right before. And I think this is a reason why a lot of people are a little bit anxious when it comes to hiring veterans, because they think that that's how we lead in the military. And actually, I served almost 18 years, and I went through all of the enlisted levels of leadership training. I went through warrant officer school, and I went through the advanced course for warrant officer school. And the one thing that they taught us in every single one is that you create influence by treating people well.
Right. Right. Well, and the other thing I think that is different about the military versus the Fortune 500 is in the military, everything is visually a two-way street. You earn loyalty by giving loyalty. You earn respect by giving respect. And in the Fortune 500, by and large, you assume loyalty because of your title, or you assume respect because of your credentials. And that was alien to me when I emerged from the military and went right into oil and gas in out in Texas. And I'm talking to the CFO, and I asked him, so what do the people in this organization think? And he said, I don't care what they think. They do what I tell them to do. And as somebody coming out of 10 years in the Air Force, my brother-in-law is a Marine, says that the thing that always tickled him about the Air Force is when you give somebody in the Air Force an order, the first question is why. And as a Marine, that was not his experience being given an order. And so,
Definitely not.
I'm coming out, and the CFO's talking to me, and he says, "Well, of course, you were in the military. You're used to just snapping your fingers and people do stuff." And I'm like, "No, no. Plenty of fear comes from the outside in the military. The last thing you want is to generate it from the inside." And because then you've matched the inside to the exterior conditions, and people are now afraid of everything.
Yeah. Well, and that's not a great environment to build in the military, when one of these days you're going to need each other, when, well, let's just say it like it is, when the shit hits the fan. Because when there's combat or anything else associated with the things that that we're training for every single day that we're serving, that we may or may not end up doing when we go to combat, all of it is to get us ready for that. And if we hate each other when we get ready to go down range, and the stuff starts happening, well, then do you really want those people to be like, well, they never took care of me, so why would I take care of you? Don't want that. No. And not only that, but it just creates an environment that is icky.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think trust is a huge. My experience with the military was we lost far more people in training than we ever lost in combat.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't trust the people around you, there are certain things that you can only do in the military if you have absolute trust that somebody else will be there. I was an enlisted contracting officer, and I was working on a roof in upstate New York, and I'm walking along a 2x4 because it's these old 19th century canted roofs to shed the snow, and I'm walking along a 2x4 and I slipped, and I started to go down the roof, and I had absolute trust that the people below me on the roof would get me. It just didn't. And the only reason I was able to save myself was because I wasn't locked in that fear moment, because I trusted everybody around me. And I think that's the key that the people mistake when they use fear as a weapon around them, is that so often the only way you're going to achieve what you need to achieve is by creating a climate of trust. And fear just is like water and sugar, it just erodes that immediately. So,
Well, you brought up something interesting in the very beginning, and that's that, fear works for a short time. And so what I would say is that if somebody had that experience where they used fear and then it worked, and then they had to go through all kinds of rehabilitation in their organization to get rid of that culture, but then they just always remember that fear works. Just know that, there is actually a time and a place for something like that. Now, I wouldn't say something so drastic, to just constantly go hammer, 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 and not care about people all the time. But what I would say is, if you have a toxic environment at work, and it's a lot of stuff, maybe you've hired the wrong people, and it just starts getting worse and worse and worse over time. Sometimes fear can be used for a short amount of time to wake people up.
Right.
And
Right.
then what's interesting is, once you wake them up and they're like, oh my gosh, Stephen just got a little wild with us and he's never done that before. Well, then that is an opportunity for you to go back to what you were doing before, but then do it in a way where you can build up the trust from all of those people, because you wake them up, you get their trust, and then the culture is not going to be the same as it was.
That's true. I think the challenge we run into is the guy who started Under Armour said, had a quote, and he said that trust is earned in sips and it's lost in buckets.
Oh my gosh.
And
Yes.
so when you think about it, you've earned that trust. And this was my big evolution as leader. I started my company in 2013. By 2019, I began to realize I had 7 people working for me, 6 people, who were absolutely unique in the world. They were the only people in the world who knew something, and it took them 10, 15 years to learn it.
Okay.
Incredibly complicated, and the only way you learn it, frankly, is by messing up a lot.
Uh-huh.
And so they had learned it working for a big Fortune 500, not for me. And I realized I can't make these people afraid. There is no way, because they'll just shrug and say, I guess you have to fire me. I'm not putting information into our CRM tool. That's just not going to happen, Steve. I say, well, the CRM tool is very important and you need to use it. Okay. It's just your lips to God's ear. I don't know what to tell you. And I realized the only tool left in my toolbox was fear, and it wasn't going to work.
Mm-mm.
And the challenge was, I had not led by fear those first 6 years running my business. But so I go to the toolbox. It's time to use fear. I've got to wake everybody up. And it wasn't going to work. And that was a real aha moment for me. It's like that had always worked before. Because to your point, sometimes it's almost like there's a line from Grosse Point Blank, the movie Shakabuku, the kick to the back of the head that wakes you up and gives you clarity on the world around you. And yes, as leaders, sometimes we use fear for that. Sometimes, like with our kids, we'll use a loud voice when we've never used a loud voice before, just to change the environment enough to wake everybody up. But yeah, I realized that wasn't going to work. And that kind of started me on the journey of how do you lead without fear? And I got there. The trouble was I lost so much trust with my team that it was going to take forever for them to learn to trust me again.
Mm.
And sometimes as a leader, you have to realize, I'm no longer the right person to lead this organization, because either because of my actions or because of what the business had to do, we've lost the trust of the staff. I need to give the reins to somebody else because they'll give them a chance. And
Well,
that's a tough lift as a leader.
Well, and what's interesting, especially in a small to medium sized business, it gets to the point where you had the great idea. You built the team. You scaled it to a certain extent. But with you as that person that had the idea, and you got it to scale, and you can see the way forward, sometimes that same person needs to continue being the visionary, and they need to hire a manager to carry out those tasks, because there's a different translation in your head to the way that everybody else is going to work. And sometimes you need that intermediary. It's the E-Myth, is it Gerber? I can't remember what his name is, Gerber, but he talked about how every business needs the visionary, the manager, and the technician. And you just hit that point.
Right. Well, and I think the biggest challenge is this was a tough thing for me to realize. So when I left Palisade and I started my own thing again, I got a note from a friend of mine who is a partner at a big venture capital firm. And he said, Steve, you're starting on this new journey. I need you to know you're not a visionary. And that was probably one of the toughest conversations I've had in my life, because I always thought of myself, founder, visionary, creative, change agent. And he said, you are all those things. You're a change agent, you're creative, you're intensely creative. The challenge for you is, he's talking to me, you have a bunch of different visions. You're an entrepreneur. You're the person who takes the vision and operationalizes it and makes it make money, makes it work. But you're going to want to do that for 10 different things. You don't have one thing that you lock in on and become monomaniacal about. That's the visionary we're looking for when we're putting money into a business. We're looking for that visionary leader, but we don't trust leaders who have two visions. You need to have just one. And that was never going to be me. And that was 2 years ago. And that was a tough conversation because even in my own company, my co-founder, Craig, is the CEO. He's the visionary. I've always been the guy who made the trains run on time. I'm the entrepreneur. And there's nothing at all wrong with that. I think one of the big things when you look at the E-Myth or you look at any of these other frameworks, you have to be comfortable with who you actually are rather than sort of feel like I need to be the founder. I need to be the visionary leader, because you may not be that. You may have the idea, but you may need to partner with somebody, click together, and then you're going to be successful. And that's tough, especially as a single person company. A lot of people don't have that luxury.
No.
So,
no. That's extremely interesting.
Yeah, it's one of the things we end up doing through the UCF Business Incubator in Groundswell here in Florida. The UCF is the University of Central Florida. And as a mentor through those business incubators, I am often the guy who sits down with the founder, the visionary, and looks in the cradle and says, "That is an ugly baby. Wow, that is the ugliest baby I think I've ever seen." And they react about the same way a mom would if you said that to them. But they need to hear it. They need somebody outside their own head. And if you're a solopreneur, you've got to look for that person that you can trust who will do that from a position of helping you as opposed to just telling you your baby's ugly because they like the look on your face when they do. So
yeah, that is really good actually. So not on here, but on LinkedIn I can see, because I have it above me here, I don't know if you know who this is, but a guy by the name of Craig Klutz says, "Good words, great concepts. Thank you for participating in the conversation there, Craig." I think I agree with you. I always made it a point to, especially with the people that I surround myself with, because I got to pick and choose very, very carefully who I give all of my insights and ideas to, because otherwise they're going to take it and run with their own thing, or maybe whatever the case may be. But one of the things I look for in those people is exactly what you just got done saying. Having that honest broker as a friend who, they don't really want to hurt your feelings or destroy you in some kind of a way, but at the same time, if you don't hear the truth, it's going to destroy. You're going to destroy everything you're doing. You're going to implode from the inside.
Absolutely. And the thing that I when I'm working with my clients, one of the things I tell them a lot is you've got to triangulate. I always have three mentors. This is something that I learned at Oracle. You always have three mentors. You have one who is way farther than you on your path. That is the person who's kind of your spirit guide. You have somebody who's a peer, but in a different industry, different situation, different. And then you have what I call the hippie. You have somebody who is so far outside your realm that they are coming at everything as if they are a 5-year-old who's never heard it before. And when you have conversations with those three personality types around you, and people can pick three different personality types, but the thing I always say is, if you're a veteran, you have to have a non-veteran mentor. If you have ADHD, you have to have a normie, a non-ADHD. That's, I live in a house full of people with ADHD. I'm the normie. There you go. Yeah. And so you have to have somebody who has that different approach, that different worldview. And sometimes they're giving you the hard truth, the ugly baby, but sometimes they're just asking a question like, well, why is it like that? And you say, well, that's the way I just do it. Well, why? And suddenly you're asking yourself why. And that's incredibly valuable.
Yeah. Well, you can only see so much on your own without having an outside point of view. You have to have an outside point of view in order to make anything work, because otherwise, gosh, how many times have you, or I know I can spit off a whole bunch of them, but how many times have you been stuck in a project like your book, for example, and just wait till you get that back from the editor. You're going to see all the hard work that you put into it, that they're going to be like, ah.
The good news is my editor is about a foot taller than I am, and so I'm not going to be mad at him. I'm just going to say, "Oh, wow, that's fantastic! Great work, thank you."
Well, you know what I mean, right?
Yes.
That outside person, you have to get another point of view,
Yes.
especially if you're starting something new, because there's always going to be something that you didn't consider. And when you're doing a business specifically, that outside point of view probably needs to be another business owner. Unfortunately, not too many non-business owners can even see the vision of starting something on your own as something that's actually going to work. So get an opinion of somebody who believes in the idea of doing something great and doing it on your own, and starting something from scratch, or taking somebody else's model and using at your own, or whatever the case may be, because otherwise you might not get great feedback.
Right, right. You're either going to get somebody who's a cheerleader who just wants you. Basically, I call that the Chat GPT version. It's, wow, you're the smartest person I've ever talked to. That idea is going to work great. And then you're going to fail. The thing I always tell people is, I think I'm a good mentor through these mentoring programs because I'm 2 and 5. I've had 2 successes. I've had 5 failures. And you would think, well, you're the last person I should be talking to. You failed
Mm-mm,
5 times. But
mm-mm.
you really want to talk to somebody who's confronted the pit, the abyss, right? And pivoted or worked their way out of it. And the key, though, is that at the end of the day, everybody who's ever started a business is crazy. I mean, if you think about it, it is so risky to start a business. And so you have to stay a little crazy. And I got some advice recently that was also hard to listen to, which is, Steve, at a certain level, you have to stop looking around corners, finding problems and solving them. You can hire somebody with that skill. What you can't hire is the person who's willing to listen to that and ignore it. That's the crucial thing to being a successful business owner. Is, you're absolutely right. I see that problem coming. It could put us out of business, but I'm still going ahead. I've still decided this is the right thing to do with all the facts, because everybody who's ever been successful has hit that moment, and where everybody else quit, they kept going.
Yeah. Yeah. It does. Yeah. It takes a special kind of person to start and run a business. And that's, in my opinion, I'm just going to put a plug in for our fellow service members, because while we were serving, it doesn't matter what we were doing. We didn't have the option to quit.
Right.
So when it comes to going from serving in the military, especially for those that serve 5 to 10 years or more, we just kind of have the special thing that's needed to start a business, which is, gosh, the warrior ethos for the Army was, I will always place a mission first. I will never accept defeat. I will never quit. I will never leave a fallen comrade. So if you're never going to quit, well, then that's the person you want on your side.
Well, it's funny because one of the things when I'm talking about my biography, I often talk about I was the first person who opened the former Soviet Union to doing research contracts with the West. And it's
Okay.
because I was the only warranted contracting officer sitting there in London when the Berlin Wall fell, and suddenly we had access to decades of research and all this stuff from the former Soviet Union. And people say, well, how did you ever get in a position to do that? And I said, well, see, I was in the military. They didn't care whether I could or not. The mission was, accomplish that, or we'll throw you in jail. That's the fear element. But the key is, I didn't want to let the people around me down. That's
Yeah.
the trust element.
Yep.
And so that, I think that's one of the things I really like, the blue collar ethos that a lot of people in their early 20s have right now, because they're right back in that scenario. If you're an electrician working either on a house or in a data center, they don't care if you give it your best. They care that you accomplished what you set out to accomplish.
That's right.
And I think that's really healthy for us as a culture. And we got away from that for a long time. So,
I still find that exists a lot. With people saying something, and then the actual action part, those don't always happen hand in hand. A lot of people will say something and then not do it. And that, to me, I don't understand how that equation ever existed in the first place. But the more I exist out in the civilian workforce, I do know that sometimes things just don't work out that way. So yeah, that's why I went from working in jobs out in the civilian world to starting my own thing. A, because I had my military retirement, so that was possible. But B, there's that component of being around people that plan with you and plan with you and plan with you. And then right when it comes time for execution, whether for whatever reason it is,
right.
all of those great plans that you came up with together just disintegrate. They just explode.
Well, what was it? I think it was Eisenhower talked about how no battle was ever won without a plan, but no battle ever won according to plan. You have to have a plan, but
You
you have
do.
to realize that the plan is not going to survive the first contact with reality.
It is not.
And
No.
one of the bad things we learn is Fortune 500. One of the things, and I mean no disrespect to anybody who's got a Fortune 500 background. I have a Fortune 500 background. We are the last people sometimes who should be advising a small business. It is incredibly dangerous when I'm talking to a founder and he or she says, "Oh, it's great. I've got a Fortune 500 guy on my team." And I will say, look, when I was a VP at a Fortune 500, a couple things. I couldn't buy a box of pencils without three people signing off on it. So you have this illusion of power in Fortune 500. But the second thing is it would take months, years, or never for the impact of my decisions to really impact the business because there's so much padding. You have billions and billions of dollars around you. So the thing I work with people on when we're advising a small business is you've got to find people who are positive, who find their way out of problems. That is where the military background helps, but it's also where operational background helps, that sort of thing. They are used to finding their way out of problems, so they don't let the fact that there will be problems stop them. But they also understand that everything has a consequence that means the survival of the business or the death of the business. Every decision comes down to that. And that is not a pressure that a lot of people can handle.
No, no. And it's even more so in the small businesses, unfortunately, especially in those first 5 years, which I'm still in, which I struggle with sometimes, which is okay. I actually have a lot of fun constantly figuring out where I've screwed up.
Sure.
But it's if you make too many wrong decisions, you're at a point where your business's income can go straight to zero. And then how many months can you sustain that before you have to completely shut the doors? That's why it's kind of crazy to start a small business, especially one by yourself, because it's not crazy though. I love doing it. Maybe
It
I'm
is.
maybe that says something about me, Stephen. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little bit crazy. But
Well, we all
I
are.
think it's just so important to do that. Otherwise we wouldn't have all these businesses we have in the world.
Right, right. The thing that especially when I'm working with younger people, because everybody I mentor seems to be half my age these days. But the thing I work with them on is how do we create tests about the decisions you're going to make with your small business that cost nothing or the impact is zero. So instead of betting the entire business on this new product launch, take the element of the product that you think customers want, satisfy this customer with it, and see if it really works. And because I think so often, especially people with large company backgrounds think, this is my product, I'm gonna do it, and then the world will line up. And when you're in a big company, the world is lining up for your brand. They're lining up because it's NVIDIA, not because it's a 5070, right? So
Well,
that's the
yeah.
key. And when you're a small business, you don't have that brand identity. So the thing that I work with people on is, and we reduce the crazy by doing this. What are ways that you can test your ideas that don't bet your entire livelihood? And then the funny thing is, I have yet to find an idea that we can't test in a zero cost way. And even in things like the semiconductor business or life sciences, where you think I've got to build a facility and then start making it, there's always a way to test the idea. And so that I think is the biggest key for me and I look at it in my own business. I have three different businesses I'm in right now. It's every time I have a decision, it's what is the low cost, low risk way to test this?
And I'm going to go ahead and say, because maybe this is from experience, maybe not, but don't just go throw ad spend on a new idea.
Right, right, right. Oh my God, yes. Well, and the thing is, it's funny because I have this argument with a lot of founders. Everybody remembers Steve Jobs saying what Henry Ford said, that if I was going to ask people what they wanted, I would have been building a faster horse,
But yeah,
right? And the thing I tell people is Steve Jobs and Henry Ford were building genre-changing technologies. I'm going to build something that makes you go 20 miles an hour. I'm going to build the internet in the palm of your hand. There are no small businesses I talk to who are doing that. So you have no excuse not to listen to your customers. You have got to
well,
be obsessed with what they think and what they want. Otherwise, you're going to put things out there they don't want, and they're not going to buy it.
Well, but I don't know. I don't know exactly as much as I probably should about Henry Ford's background. But what I will say about Steve Jobs is that even then, with him being the guy that didn't know it all, he had to go out and have so many conversations
Right.
and get told to go kick rocks more than a number of times before he could even get somebody to listen and entertain his idea.
Well, and
So
we all think the iPhone sort of showed up and it was a miracle, but BlackBerry kind of created the idea that I should have some of the internet in the palm of my hand. The iPhone couldn't have been successful until the BlackBerry was successful.
that's right.
And so I think
That's right.
that's the key. You have to ask yourself sometimes, is this the right moment for my idea? And the biggest thing when I'm working with founders is your thing a complete solution or are you part of a bigger solution? In which case, instead of, you may have this one thing I do videography. Well, people need videography and copywriting. They want the entire commercial, not just you shooting the video. So you have a piece of a solution, not the whole solution. So one of the things as small business owners and as leaders we have to do is look around and say, who around me can combine with me to go, I've got peanut butter, they've got chocolate, now we have a Reese's peanut butter cup, we've got something. People want that. And so I think that's the biggest key. I don't think of myself as a salesperson. I think of myself as a business development person because it's like, okay, I think our customer needs this, and I only have these three things. I'm missing two. Who has those? And then click it together. And as some small business owners, sometimes we forget to do that. We think we've got to solve it all, and you don't. Successful people don't. They connect with others.
Hmm. Those are great words. And we are at the point where I would like to wrap it up. So Stephen, if there was one piece of advice that you could share with anybody in my audience, I have a lot of military, but I also have a lot of people in operations and HR. So if there's one piece of advice you could share with everybody, what would that be?
I think the biggest piece of advice is to realize that we think of leadership as being decisiveness. When we think about a leader and we think about what we respect in a leader, we think of them being decisive. They don't dither. They're going to go A or B. They're going to pick a direction and we're going to go with it. I think the thing you have to do as leaders, you have to communicate around you that because I've picked A, doesn't mean it's A forever. It means it's A until we figure out that A isn't the right way, and then we're going to deflect. We're going to be moving. But I think that sometimes with leaders, I think people get into this mindset of I made a decision, now I have to make it work. And yes, you do. I mean, that's the thing. You don't dither, you don't go to analysis paralysis. But I think be open to the idea of and communicate it all around you that leadership and decisiveness aren't the same thing. Decisiveness is an element of leadership. And so I think that just don't get locked up and think that if I made a decision it was the wrong one, I'm a bad leader. You realizing it was the wrong decision makes you a great leader.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I not taking away from any of that because I think what you said was amazing. But if I could add anything, the only thing I would say is that once you realize that you made that wrong decision and you're steering people down the wrong path, there is absolutely nothing wrong with sucking up your pride, admitting that there was something that went wrong, and then making sure that you discuss with everybody how you can steer yourself down the right path.
Amen. Amen. Absolutely. Being transparent with the people around you, because here's the thing, they all know. We think sometimes that we're hiding it from everyone, and we're not. And you go to your team and you're like, I made the wrong decision. Everybody's like, yeah, you did.
I need to be resolute. I need to be resolute. No, you don't.
Well, and
Shut up
we
and
do.
suck up your pride and do what you got to do.
Well, and we want to be resolute that I want us all to be successful. I'm not going to deflect from that. I'm resolute about that. How we're successful is always open to discussion.
Right. And just as you said, people can see that. People can see when you're hiding something, whether it's knowing that you screwed up or that you're not being authentic, whatever the case may be. Your people will always be able to sniff that out, even if it's just something's wrong and I don't know what it is.
That's very true. Very true.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen. Before we sign off, everyone, Speak Up, Show Up, Lead. It's my book. It's my story. Amazon.com. Check it out if that's something that interests you. Speak Up, Show Up, Lead. And all of you that are listening now or in the future, please don't forget to like, subscribe. But the most important thing is to leave a comment below so that we can keep the conversation going. I'd like to know what you thought about this conversation with Stephen, and I'll pass that information on to him because he's a good guy. I enjoyed meeting him for the first time, and now we're here on a podcast. So thank you all for joining me on my journey, but we're going to have to take off now. So we'll see you next time.
Take care.